Few beings in the 41st millennium can stand toe-to-toe with a Primarch for more than a few seconds. Dreadnoughts are one of these indomitable beings. The Horus Heresy and the 41st millennium alike are littered with the legendary deeds of these walking, half-dead iron behemoths. Within every dreadnought lies a sarcophagus containing the tattered remains of a fallen warrior who has been grievously wounded beyond all hope of recovery. Presented with the choice between an ignominious death or continued service, many choose or are forced into being interred within a dreadnought sarcophagus. Using technology from the dark age of man, the mortally wounded soldier is suspended in a half-death-like state. Their senses are wired into the dreadnought so they can see and move the war machine as if it were their own body, so that even in death they may fight for the Emperor of mankind. The Imperium has used dreadnoughts since the earliest days of the Unification Wars. Known as Proto Dreadnoughts, these steam-powered behemoths were used by and against the Emperor's Thunder Warriors, seemingly able to be used by superhumans and mortals alike. Though little is known about these Proto Dreadnoughts, they would form the base for the patterns of dreadnoughts we know today. However, the very first named dreadnought pattern was the UR-golem pattern, which was used during the aforementioned Unification Wars, seemingly being used by the early Astartes, Thunder Warriors, and even the Custodes. Though because this dreadnought seems to have only been used during the Unification Wars, very little is known. No one is quite sure why the Emperor of Mankind ordered most of the histories of this time destroyed, lost, or sealed at the highest level. This could be to cover up the horrifying technologies discovered and used during the Unification Wars, many of which are still sealed in the vaults of terror to this very day. The next pattern employed by the Imperium after the UR-golem pattern isn't confirmed with any certainty. However, there's a very good chance it's the Lucifer pattern, as it's the only pattern to be completely retired from use within the Imperium. Only seeing use in the earliest days of the Great Crusade, its armaments and technical specifications have been lost to the murky depths of time. We don't know much, but perhaps this dreadnought pattern is a reference to the old Rogue Trader era designs, seeing how in-universe it's been replaced by more modern designs, just like the actual models. Though another contender for perhaps the oldest pattern is the Castraferrum pattern dreadnought. It is potentially the most iconic dreadnought in all of 40k. When most think of dreadnoughts, they think of these stubby, smoke-belching giants, often affectionately referred to as boxnauts. The Castraferrum dreadnought has at its core a small thermic reactor powering its numerous weapons, sensors, and life support systems. Able to be equipped with numerous different weapon systems, this shows the Castraferrum's greatest strength: its modularity. Able to be modified and set up to serve any battlefield role, the Castraferrum is truly a jack of all trades and a master of war. During the time of the Great Crusade, uncountable patterns and variations of the Castraferrum were made. Though few made it to the dark depths of the 41st millennium, the most common and well-known pattern of Castraferrum during the Crusade was the Mark IV, which later would gain a reputation for having a vulnerability to demonic possession, though this is likely the superstitious nature of the later Imperium projecting a vulnerability onto the Mark IV. They in all probability made this false correlation simply because it was so numerous, especially in the latter stages of the Horus Heresy, where its robust and cost-effective design made it ideal for the warring legions and scattered supply lines of the Great Betrayal. Little is known about the earlier marks, though they were likely very similar to the Mark IV. And in truth, not even the Imperium knows all the patterns and marks of the Castraferrum. Yet, the Castraferrum has been the most enduring dreadnought in the Imperium's service, much like the Mark VII power armor for the Astartes. For over 10,000 years and across countless worlds, these defiant boxnauts have allowed the wounded heroes of the Imperium one last chance at glory. The Holy Castraferrum's development did indeed continue into and after the Horus Heresy and into the new Dark Age. However, before those developments would come to pass, another would stir. The Contemptor pattern dreadnought is a direct successor to the Castraferrum, merging the technologies of the Archaeo-Technarchs of Terra and the mighty Tech-Adepts of Mars. The Contemptor utilizes the strange arcane systems used by the fabled Legio Cybernetica, powered by an arc reactor, a technology lost during the Horus Heresy. The Contemptor pattern was able to become faster, stronger, more durable, and even featured atomantic shielding. This dreadnought truly represents what the Imperium was capable of producing at the peak of its power. Yet, this marvel of technological advancement was not without its drawbacks. The advanced systems demanded rigorous maintenance from extremely skilled tech magos, along with long logistical lines to supply these mighty war machines with the rare materials required for their upkeep. Perhaps their most infamous drawback was if their arc reactor was breached, the Dreadnought would detonate in a catastrophic explosion, which would make repair and recovery of these expensive war machines impossible. With that being said, this Dreadnought's capacity for nuclear explosions wasn't always unintentional, and in fact, something a Dreadnought pilot in the most dire of circumstances could do entirely of their own volition to spite their enemies, or to simply choose their own fate. As seen in Flight of the Eisenstein, when two of the remaining loyalist Death Guard Marines show one final defiance at Istvan.
Who betrayed us? Why? In Terra's name, why?
Ulysses, get in there! We only have a few seconds.
No, my men first.
Idiot, I will stay. Nothing will be able to crack my hide. You go now.
He shoved Temeter with his colossal manipulator claw.
Go inside, damn you!
Ulysses Temeter stumbled back a step, but his gaze was still on the sky.
No.
He said, just as flickers of brilliant light turned the day a glittering white. At high altitudes overhead, the first wave of virus warheads detonated in series, a wall of airbursts instantly unleashing a black rain of destruction. The viral clades feasted on native airborne bacteria. The thin, dark bloom of the death cloud rolled out over the coral city. The Life Eater did as it had been engineered to do. Where a molecule of it touched an organic form, it spread instant, putrefying death. Flesh rotted and blood became ooze, bones shredded and turned brittle. Istvanians and Astartes alike died screaming. Temeter saw the warriors running towards him, dying on their feet. He knew that he had dallied too long, and he shouted with all his might.
Close the hatch, close it!
The men in the bunker did as he told them, even as he tasted blood in his mouth and felt his skin prickling with budding lesions. The metal door slammed shut and hissed with a pressure seal, locking him out. Temeter hoped they had been quick enough. With luck, they would not have taken any of the virus inside with them. He managed 2 stumbling steps before he fell, the muscles in his legs singing in agony. Huron Fowl caught him in his arms.
I told you to run, you fool.
The virus having moved effortlessly through the breather grill and into his lungs. His hand flailed at the metal flank of the Dreadnought and traced a runnel of dark fluid. Even through the pain, Temeter understood. There was a small fracture in the old warrior's ceramite casing. Not enough to have slowed him on the battlefield, but more than the virus needed to reach inside the Dreadnought's hull and savage the remnants of flesh inside.
You lied.
Veteran's prerogative. We'll go together then, shall we?
Huron Fowl asked, embracing Temeter's body to his own, moving him swiftly away from the bunker. His systems were on the verge of shutdown as he stumbled to a safe distance, skidding to a halt.
This death is ours. We choose it. We deny you your victory.
With a single, burning nerve impulse, the mind of the warrior at the heart of the Dreadnought uncoupled the governor controls on his compact fusion generator and let it overload. For a moment, there was a tiny star on the battered plains outside of the Coral City. Regardless of its nuclear drawbacks, the pros vastly outweighed the cons, and the Contemptor became the most popular Dreadnought chassis of the Great Crusade era. Numerous legions and forge worlds iterated on the design, producing new marks and patterns. Perhaps the most common alternative pattern was the Mortis Sub-Pattern. This is essentially a normal Contemptor with 2 identical weapon mounts and a powerful helical targeting array. This targeting array is a sophisticated bank of combat cogitators, capable of tracking even the swiftest of targets. However, this targeting array does come with one major issue, that being when the Dreadnought is using the array, it cannot move. This immense drain on the Dreadnought's reactor disables its motive systems, essentially forcing the Dreadnought into becoming a stationary, albeit powerful, weapons platform. The Mortis Sub-Pattern also shared the Contemptor's main drawback of extremely demanding maintenance, only exacerbating this issue with the addition of the massive cogitator bank that was the helical targeting array, an issue that would force the legions to adapt with the Contemptor Cortus. A highly successful pattern developed during the Ulanor campaign, which at the time was the largest war the Imperium had ever fought against the Orcs. It was in this fierce fighting that Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the then Lunar Wolves, would earn the title of War Master for his ingenious leadership, being placed in command of all the Imperium's armies. The The rapid losses inflicted on the legions by the orcs meant that the Contemptor's complex systems became too hard to maintain, so rather than falling back on older models of dreadnoughts, the Cortus pattern simply replaced those advanced systems with simpler, more robust versions. This created an extremely durable and maintainable version of the Contemptor, if somewhat less potent, yet still let it retain many of the advanced design elements inherent to its chassis. However, its ad hoc battlefield creation did leave the pattern with some rather infamous instability issues. Due to the nature of their production, Cortus patterns were of spotty quality, though perhaps the most infamous of these issues was with the Dreadnought's neural link driving the pilots insane. Needless to say, the Mechanicum wasn't pleased, and the Cortus pattern was quickly phased out of the Imperial arsenal. Yet the fires of the Horus Heresy would reignite the production of the Cortus. The strain on supply lines and the vicious fighting of the Great Betrayal would leave numerous legions without the means to produce new Contemptors, or maintain their existing numbers reliably. Thus, the Cortus pattern cemented itself as one of the most numerous patterns of the Contemptor Dreadnought, much to the Mechanicum's disdain. One Contemptor variant that had the full blessing of the Mechanicum, however, was the Incaendius pattern, used exclusively by the Blood Angels, developed in the Mechanicum enclaves on Baal's first moon. This pattern was a master of shock assault, equipped with a pair of fearsome lightning claws, with inbuilt heavy flamers, known as the Talons of Perdition. Though possibly the most terrifying aspect of this dreadnought is its Incaendius booster pack, a single-use plasma thruster that allows it to leap like jump pack-equipped assault marines, hurling its armored bulk into the foe for devastating rapid assaults. Yet, the still more earth-shattering option this allows the dreadnought to be deployed from low orbit, meaning this calamitous engine of war can strike anywhere, anytime with giant flaming talons. Truly, only the sons of Sanguinius could wield such an awe-inspiring pattern. Yet, the Blood Angels were not the only legion to create their own pattern of Contemptor Dreadnought. Forged by Magnus, Primarch of the Thousand Suns himself, the Osiron pattern was the culmination of decades of research. For to install a Psyker within a Dreadnought had only led to madness and malign psychic manifestations. Yet, it was with Magnus's invention of the Osiron, a crowning psychometric barrier lattice, that finally allowed the Psykers to be interred within Dreadnoughts. Magnus even went on to share the schematics for the Osiron with all of the other legions. So why are Librarian Dreadnoughts so rare? Well, the creation of the Osiron pattern was mostly a political move by Magnus to solidify the Librarius project. This was a project to embed Psykers as key units within the Legiones Astartes, known as Librarians, in an attempt to combat the Imperium's bigotry towards Psykers. Yet, the Council of Nikaea, a summit between the Primarchs for if the Imperium should allow Psykers within the legions, swiftly followed the completion of the Osiron pattern. The summit resulted in the issuing of the Edict of Nikaea, officially banning Psykers from the legions. In addition to this, few legions even accepted Magnus' schematics due to the aforementioned bigotry held against Psykers. The Osiron pattern could have been the first paving stone on the road to an Imperium more tolerant towards Psykers, but sadly, fate had other plans in mind. Now, the esoteric Psi Arcana needed to create Osirons has been lost to the Imperium, and few chapters in the current era retain dreadnoughts capable of interring Psykers. The legions weren't the only ones to modify and expand on the Contemptor's chassis. The Emperor's own vaunted bodyguards, the Custodes, also made extensive use of the Contemptor Dreadnought, dubbing their variants the Achillus and Galatus patterns. The Achillus and Galatus patterns are, at their core, just Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts, but with the same skill, artificer, and superior materials used to craft all of the Custodes' armaments. Their armor plated with auramite, and every aspect of their mechanical bodies crafted by the finest artificers. The Achillus pattern is equipped with a pair of dreadnought-sized power fists, with which it wields the menacing Dread Spear, which is simply a gigantic version of a Guardian Spear, replacing the bolter with a potent Corvée las Pulsar. It's basically a supercharged las cannon on the end of a power spear, capable of cutting tanks in half. If there's one word the Guardians of the Emperor do not know, it is certainly overkill. These armaments that Custodes interred within an Achillus fight just as deadly and just as swiftly as when they weren't. So while the Achillus is a master of assault, the Galatus serves as a master of defense, equipped with a truly enormous power sword with inbuilt flamers, because every Custodes melee weapon needs to be just bristling with guns. In addition to its flaming blade, the Galatus carries a Gravis Presidium shield, combining both a series of energy fields and layers of reinforced plasteel and ceramite. This shield and the already extremely durable nature of the Contemptor chassis makes the Galatus nigh indestructible on the battlefield. What's quite interesting about the Custodes variant of the Contemptor is that they are essentially just giant versions of their regular units. The Achillus pairs perfectly with guard squads, and the Galatus pattern offers an exceptional anchor point for a squad of sentinels. After the Contemptor, it was in an effort to fill these more specialized roles that more Dreadnought chassis were developed. The Deredeo Dreadnought was developed from the same initiative that resulted in the Contemptor's creation, the idea being to fuse the technologies of Mars and Terra. Taking many of the systems and general design of the Contemptor, the Deredeo is very similar. However, the Contemptor was designed as more of a general assault unit. The Deredeo was designed as a pure heavy weapons platform. Yet in practice, it became an extremely cutting-edge design, employing experimental systems such as an atomantic pervase, a force field designed for boarding actions that can turn a Deredeo into an impregnable bulwark of heavy weapons in a tight corridor. Combining that with the tried and tested helical targeting array, you can see how the Deredeo is the natural successor to the Mortis pattern of the Contemptor Dreadnought. Initially produced in small numbers and sent out to the legions, it quickly earned itself a positive reputation as a specialist weapons platform. After the popularity of its initial deployment and the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, the Deredeo was in extremely high demand. Yet the Deredeo shared the same major issues as the Contemptor, relying on the arc reactor and requiring even more specialist, expert maintenance. They were also extremely resource intensive to produce, and few Forge Worlds possessed the knowledge or resources to meet the demand of the warring legions. Yet there was one Dreadnought that even fewer knew how to produce. Whereas the Contemptor and Deredeo were built with the Mechanicum and the intent of sharing mutual technology, the Leviathan Dreadnought was built in secret on Terra. Rumors even circulated that the technology used was forged by the Emperor himself. Its development was based upon the Contemptor and combined ancient technologies from the Age of Strife that had been kept secret on Mars. Needless to say, the Mechanicum was utterly outraged by the Leviathan's development, seeing it as a dreadnought purpose-built to destroy their battle automata. The Leviathan in this regard is another point of tension in a long list of slights between the Mechanicum and Terra. Some even go as far to suggest that the Leviathan was developed with the express purpose of some planned future war between Terra and Mars. There has always been a lingering tension between the two, and the development of this dreadnought is just another example of the underlying factors that led to the rise of the Dark Mechanicum. Regardless of its controversial development, the Leviathan Dreadnought is an absolute monster of a machine, taking an amount of time and quality of resources comparable to an Imperial Knight to produce. This led to a comparatively small number being made before the start of the Horus Heresy, and with their development being limited to Terra, only the Loyalist legions had any great number of them. It was during the Heresy, though, that the Leviathans earned their reputation for relentless destruction, quickly being noted by the legions as a formidable siege and hunter-killer unit. Their effectiveness could not be denied. Yet the use of the Leviathans came at a great cost to the interred Marine. This dreadnought placed immense strain on its pilot, causing the Marine to be burned out, their neurons fried by the immense load the dreadnought placed on their minds, the massive weapon systems that could be mounted to the dreadnaught's immense frame, and the improved force fields the chassis sported made many Marines willing to pay this price. The Leviathan is arguably not just a dreadnought. Its bulk and devastating power put it in a weight class entirely of its own, a weight class that only one dreadnought truly outmatches: the Telemon Heavy Dreadnought. The Telemon's origins are unknown, and little is known about its development, save for that they are extremely rare, with the Custodes boasting less than a handful, each one sporting an armor plate worked by the Emperor's own hand. Utilized solely by the Adeptus Custodes, Telemon Dreadnoughts pair all the martial skill of a Custodes with the utter devastating power of a heavy dreadnought. Like all Custodes equipment, the Telemon is armed with utterly terrifying weapons handcrafted by Terra's greatest artificers, another factor contributing to just how rare these machines are. So precious are these dreadnoughts that only a rare few among the peerless ranks of the Custodes are ever given the honor of piloting one. Many sit empty for centuries waiting for a worthy champion to fall in battle. One such example is Deberand Kalimikon, a Custodes who fought for 18 hours straight after having been injected with demonic venom, his flesh literally melting off his bones and then managing to make it back to Terra. Such is the caliber of warriors selected to be given the right to pilot a machine that can go toe-to-toe with greater demons and Imperial Knights and win. With the end of the Horus Heresy, the Imperium now lacked the knowledge needed to produce the Contemptor Pattern Dreadnought and its descendant patterns. Truly, the Contemptor's greatest undoing was its greatest strength, its extremely advanced technology. This forced the Imperium to fall back on the ever-dependable Castraferrum Dreadnought, though this did lead to some innovations in its design, such as the Ironclad pattern, which was said to have been invented by the Primarch of the Salamanders himself, Vulcan, with the creation of a dreadnought known as the Iron Dragon, which we'll cover a little later on when we go over its current occupant. The Ironclad's overall design harkens back to the Leviathan, with additional armor plating and devastating close-range firepower, often serving as the spearhead for space marine assaults. Ironclads are superb for storming fortified positions. Uniquely, they sport assault launchers, a piece of equipment only usually found on space marine land raiders. These allow for Ironclads to launch explosive charges rushing into the enemy, heralded by a deluge of fragmentation explosives, usually wielding something called a seismic hammer. Ironclads are capable of causing localized earthquakes or tearing enemy armor to pieces, making them a terrifying assault unit. Very similar to the Ironclad, but lacking the advanced armor and assault launchers. The Siege Dreadnought pattern is designed for bursting through enemy fortifications. First, the Dreadnought will wade through enemy fire, relying on its armored bulk to protect it. Then, it will drill through the enemy ferrocrete walls and unleash a torrent of alchemical fire into the fortification. Few defenders can survive the onslaught of a Siege Dreadnought, and those who do will have to contend with the 12-ton ceramite behemoth smashing through their now ruined and flaming wall. Not all the innovations and technical developments of dreadnoughts were lost during the Horus Heresy, as the Mortis Sub-Pattern survived into the 41st millennium. Though now obviously using the Castraferrum chassis, these Mortis Pattern dreadnoughts are now far rarer than back in the Heresy, as the chapters of the 41st millennium don't have the numbers to properly employ them in their intended role as fire support platforms. Perhaps there's no other Castraferrum pattern that better embodies the role dreadnoughts play in the 41st millennium than a Chaplain Dreadnought. Not quite the usual pattern, Chaplain Dreadnoughts represent that link to the glorious past of a chapter better than any other dreadnought. The chassis of Chaplain Dreadnoughts are usually far more ornate, but beyond this they aren't really any different to any other Castraferrum pattern dreadnought. Yet, when they take to the battlefield, they become beacons of inspiration for their fellow Astartes, bellowing long-forgotten litanies of hatred against the enemies of man from ancient Vox speakers, breaking apart foes with all the fury they held in life, and advising their new commanders with the wisdom of eons. Similar to Chaplain Dreadnoughts, Venerable Dreadnoughts aren't really a unique pattern. Instead, they're dreadnoughts that are particularly old or house heroes of the chapter, though being particularly ancient means they can often be equipped with esoteric equipment lost to the modern Imperium. There's few chapters that use more unique equipment than the Space Wolves, whose Venerable Dreadnoughts are equipped with Fenrisian Great Axes and Blizzard Shields, which are essentially a giant power axe and storm shield respectively. Probably the most famous chapter variants of dreadnoughts belong to the Blood Angels, being the Librarian Dreadnought and the Furioso pattern. Developed in M35 by an unknown master of the Forges, the pattern sports a pair of dreadnought power fists. In the 41st millennium, each of these surviving patterns has become deeply venerated by the chapter and are irreplaceable. In war, as you would expect of the Sons of Sanguinius, the Furioso is a master of close-range assault, mounting truly odd weapons like a Magna Grapple, which is a potent gravitic magnet attached to a spool of adamantium chain, which is launched onto a vehicle's hull before dragging it into the awaiting Furioso like a fisherman with a harpoon. Akin to the Furioso pattern is what is known as a Death Company Dreadnought. These are dreadnought chassis whose occupants have fallen to the infamous Black Rage. These dreadnoughts can be of any pattern used by the Blood Angels, as not even the most venerated warrior is truly safe from the curse of their blood. A dreadnought whose pilot falls to the Black Rage becomes an unstoppable force of destruction, often rampaging for hours or even days in their mad frenzy. Eventually, the dreadnought will be brought back under control by a Tech Marine, who will rein in the machine spirit even as the pilot screams for more blood. Once pacified, the pilot shall be examined by the chaplains to see if to induct them into the Death Company, or to grant them the Emperor's mercy there and then. Should the pilot be found stable enough for the Death Company, their dreadnought shall be daubed in black and armaments changed, becoming a Death Company Dreadnought, which they shall remain until they become too far gone or meet a violent end in the name of the God Emperor of mankind. At this point, you might be thinking that only veterans and heroes end up in dreadnoughts, but that's not the case. A great example of this, and just how disorientating awakening in a dreadnought can be, comes from the Battle of the Fang, where a Bloodclaw, a freshly initiated Astartes of the Space Wolves, is awoken for the first time. As they crawled into the scant light of the open vault doors, Freya began to make out more of their outlines. There were glints of metal amid the fur and sinew as they moved. One wolf shape had no visible eyes in its sleek face at all. All of them were gigantic, as big as the Fenrisian wolves that stalked the high places, though with none of their savage grace.
Do not watch them. They take it as a challenge.
The voice rumbled from over her shoulder, almost as deep and machine-thick as Bjorn's. Freya spun around, seeing the profile of another dreadnought in the dark.
Thank you, Lord.
The dreadnought clumped alongside her. It stank of oils and exhaust fumes.
You are mortal. Why are there no sky warriors here?
They are fully engaged, Lord. The At is under assault.
The dreadnought didn't respond immediately. Its speech was sluggish and halting.
Under assault?
An underfanged beast slunk up to them. Belly low, Freya stiffened, bringing up her sidearm.
Leave it.
Freya kept the muzzle pointed at the mass of fur and tooth. She felt her jaw tighten.
I said, leave it.
Slowly, she lowered her weapon. The beast paid her no attention, but performed the same abasement before the dreadnought as the others had done before Bjorn.
What are these things?
You are curious.
I am told so, Lord. It is a weakness, and I will work to correct it.
So you should.
The beast shot a single, unreadable glance at Freya, then crawled back into the gloom.
They are weapons, mortal. We are all weapons. Even you, in your own way, are a weapon. Let that be enough for you.
Yes, my lord.
I am called Alder. In life, I was a Bloodclaw, though the long sleep has changed that. This is my first awakening. The process is difficult. Tell me of the world of the living. That will help.
What do you wish to know, Lord?
There was a pause.
Everything.
Said Alder, his ponderous voice touched with a note of eagerness. Or perhaps it was desperation. The yearning was almost childlike.
Tell me everything.
We've saved the rarest Castraferrum pattern for last. The fabled Librarian Dreadnought, used by only 3 chapters. The Blood Angels, the Grey Knights, and of course, the Death Watch. Because if there's a rare and esoteric piece of war gear available to the Imperium, you know the Imperium's premier Xeno hunters have at least 3 hidden away in a vault somewhere. Why these are the only chapters with Librarian Dreadnoughts is pretty easy to explain. The Blood Angels don't seem to hold the same bigotry towards Psykers that the other legions did at the time of the Council of Nikaea, so it's highly likely they accepted the Osiron schematics, or at least the technological base to create their own Librarian Dreadnoughts. Now, they weren't the only legion accepting of Psykers, so why are the Blood Angels the only first founding chapter with Librarian Dreadnoughts? Well, it's for 2 simple reasons. Firstly, it's been 10,000 years of endless war. Wars that these dreadnoughts would suffer attrition in, and the technology to replace them was simply lost. Same as with Contemptors. Secondly, and maybe more importantly, the Edict of Nikaea banning all Psykers from the legions also probably played a role in this. It was issued quite shortly after the Osiron was shared with the other legions. As we also mentioned, most spurned this gift due to the Imperium's intense bigotry towards Psykers. Considering the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, Rogel Dawn, after the verdict, locked all of his legion Psykers away within their own sanctum. What do you think he did to his Psyker dreadnoughts, even if he had any to begin with, which he most likely didn't? Well, why do the Death Watch and the Grey Knights have them? The Death Watch have them because other chapters gift the Death Watch with relics, and because the Death Watch often spends their time recovering lost relics. The Grey Knights, on the other hand, are an entire chapter of Psykers, and were founded by the greatest mortal Psyker the Imperium has ever seen, Malkador the Sigillite. They also probably have the Psi Arcana know-how and access to the Osiron schematics, considering they were shared with every legion and the Grey Knights were founded with the highest authority, though it's unclear if the dreadnoughts they have are fresh productions or relics of the Imperium's glorious past. Another possible source of new Psyker-capable dreadnoughts could also be the Forge world of Zhao Arkhad. This planet was left mostly unscathed during the Horus Heresy, and was even garrisoned by seemingly loyalist Thousand Sons during the Great Betrayal. It's a Forge World famed for producing the psychic-infused armaments of the Thousand Sons. If there's anywhere in the Imperium capable of producing new Osirons, it is the original Thousand Sons associated Forge World. While these chapters are the only ones we know of at the moment that have access to Librarian Dreadnoughts, you never know what might be locked away in the reliquary vaults of some Forge World. So don't be surprised if you encounter a rare Librarian Dreadnought not of these chapters when you're reading a 40k novel. It's not impossible for more to be out there. Now, the way each of these chapters employs Librarian Dreadnoughts differs. The Deathwatch employs them to bolster the fighting power of kill teams, or as repositories of esoteric alien knowledge. The Blood Angels Librarian Dreadnoughts are all modified Furioso patterns, combining all of its strengths with a masterful and veteran Psyker, turning them into a truly destructive force on the battlefield. Yet, the Grey Knights employ them much the same as any other chapter would. This may be because all the Grey Knights are Psykers and they simply need the other capabilities of a Dreadnought more for their doctrine. Though with how secretive the Grey Knights are, we'll probably never know. Still, all three of these chapters know that a Librarian is a powerful resource not to be wasted, and that interring them in a Dreadnought only serves to turn them into a nigh indestructible maelstrom of magic and death, able to blast apart foes with psychic powers or rip them to pieces with adamantine claws. The return of Rabute Guilliman and the innovations of Call changed a lot for the Imperium, not least unleashing the first new chassis of Dreadnought in a millennia. The Redemptor Dreadnought is taller, broader, and powered by hyper-dense reactors. They are truly a fearsome sight on the battlefield. It is rumored that Call used SCT materials known only to him in the construction of these new war engines. Though perhaps the most understated yet greatest improvement the Redemptor offers is improvements in its neural link between pilot and machine, able to show impressive speed and dexterity in their control of these Dreadnoughts. Though this devastating machine comes at a harrowing cost. Dreadnoughts are known to burn out their pilots, leaving them as nothing more than a burnt husk. If it sounds like you've heard this before, and if the images of the Redemptor strike you as familiar, it's because we've seen a Dreadnought like this already, the Leviathan. The two are shockingly similar, and both very interestingly burn out their pilots due to neural strain. It does seem as if the Redemptor potentially utilizes some of the same technologies used to create the Leviathan. We know from the novel The Great Work that one of the personalities Call absorbed had worked with the Emperor on new technologies, and the Emperor is the rumored creator of the Leviathan Dreadnought. At the very least, the Leviathan utilizes Terran STCs that Mars had no access to and Call did. Alongside the Redemptor, the Brutalis and Ballistus Dreadnoughts have also been rolled out into service in the 41st millennium. Not much information on these Dreadnoughts exists that can lead one to believe they are in any way meaningfully different from the standard Redemptor, save their armaments. The Brutalis charging into battle with a pair of colossal power fists or siege claws, harkening back to the Blood Angels Furioso. This Dreadnought sports a few extra armor panels, presumably to avoid dirt and grime if close quarters engagements. However, there's currently no known evidence leading towards these panels providing any extra true protection. And the Ballistus, harkening back to the Mortis Castraferrum, is simply a Redemptor Dreadnought equipped with no melee capabilities, instead sporting 2 las cannons and a Ballistus missile rack. One has to assume Belisarius was indeed fond of the old Boxnauts when he signed off on this design. In addition, as we already mentioned, Call is rumored to have used STCs the Mechanicum didn't know of to create this new Primaris technology. It might be pure coincidence, but at the same time, there are plenty of similarities lining up here. Let us know what you think in the comments. Another of the many changes that came with the return of Guilliman was the Custodes leaving their long mourning of the Emperor and returning to the galaxy at large. Seemingly still using the same dreadnoughts that served them well during the Horus Heresy, though it would seem that they now make use of the standard Contemptors as well, possibly due to the irreplaceable losses suffered during the Siege of Terror and the Horus Heresy, though it's hard to say as there's little lore on this. So we've covered every Dreadnought and discussed how they're viewed within generic Space Marine chapters, but whilst we've gone over how utterly devastating they are, they're not universally beloved by all chapters. To go into the long sleep of a Dreadnought sarcophagus can be a harrowing experience. Imagine being sealed in a sensory deprivation chamber for thousands of years and being suddenly awoken in the direst of circumstances. Imagine how the world would have changed around you. Everyone you ever knew is long dead. Most of your senses are lost to you. Is the ferocity and power of a Dreadnought really worth all that pain? Can a Space Marine bear all that mental strain? Well, the simple fact is, some cannot. Some pilots, when they enter the deep slumber of their sarcophagus, are unable to be awoken again, so you can see why some chapters might be hesitant to expose their brothers to such a fate. A good example of a chapter rather renowned for their distaste for Dreadnoughts is the White Scars. So renowned are they for their distaste that it was long thought that the White Scars had no Dreadnought. Dreadnoughts, due to their belief that when a warrior dies, their soul should be free to roam the great beyond. Nothing exemplifies this more than when Khosrow Khan, the White Scar's 3rd Company captain, was confronted with his mortally wounded mentor, Semakar, during his pursuit of the Tau commander Shadowsun. This moment was the first time Khosrow Khan had seen Semakar show fear. His old mentor was terrified of the idea of being interred within a dreadnought. It's attitudes like this that give rise to the idea that the White Scars didn't employ dreadnoughts at all, except during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. The White Scars dreadnoughts were formed into a special order known as the Yuhan Solban. Translated into Low Gothic, this means the Guardians of the Morning and Evening Stars. These dreadnoughts guarded the Legion's gene seed repositories on Terra and Chagoris. They were seen as making the ultimate sacrifice for their brothers. While it's not clear if the Yuhan Solban were maintained into the 41st millennium, it would certainly explain the conflicting reports of the existence of White Scar's dreadnoughts, as the ghost warriors of the Yuhan Solban would only leave their solemn vigil after receiving visions of a great calamity that is their destiny to help prevent. A chapter with the complete opposite attitude to the White Scars is the Iron Hands. The attitude of the Iron Hands towards dreadnoughts is actually a key part of their lore development. Following the death of their Primarch Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands grew to despise their own humanity, their own flesh, seeking to replace it with the cold, unfeeling nature of the machine. Thus, becoming a dreadnought was and is seen as the ultimate honor, the last step in completely removing one's humanity. Iron Father Paulian Blantar went so far as to ritually remove his own flesh, to better ready himself to enter a dreadnought sarcophagus. This, combined with Medusa, the homeworld of the Iron Hands, being a bastion of Dark Age technology, has meant the Iron Hands boast an insane amount of dreadnoughts by 40k standards. Yet attitudes in the Iron Hands have shifted a little with the election of Chapter Master Cardan Stronos. Some Iron Hands have begun to no longer despise all their emotions, and have found harnessing them to be vital in prosecuting the wars of mankind. Dreadnoughts are no less revered by the Iron Hands during this cultural shift, but there are a few zealots like Paulian Blantar in the chapter now, who will go to extreme lengths to be entombed. So as you can see, attitudes to dreadnoughts vary upon chapter. We thought we'd show you the two extremes, and as you can see, each chapter has its own opinion, usually somewhere between the White Scars and the Iron Hands. With reverence or disdain, each chapter's regard for the dreadnought, be it fair or foul, is as strong as the very iron that entombs these warriors. Such attitudes vary even further, defined by doctrine, tradition, or necessity. The Iron Hands, who view these engines of war as sacred vessels of perfection, and the White Scars, who see internment as a shackle upon a warrior's soul. However, between these two extremes there is a vast spectrum of belief, as each chapter sees dreadnoughts differently. In fact, in some chapters, two dreadnoughts can have wildly differing reputations, like in the Space Wolves chapter, which holds the ravenous wolf and Murderfang, and the ever-venerable and revered Bjorn The Fell-Handed, whose renown within the history of the Imperium stands above all others, whose deeds are unmatched by any other who still serves in death. The reason why Dante is always referred to as the oldest space marine not in a dreadnought. Bjorn The Fell-Handed is the single oldest surviving space marine in the Imperium. If you haven't heard of Bjorn The Fell-Handed, you should have. The first chapter master of the Space Wolves chapter following the creation of the Codex Astartes. This big, beastly bear of a dreadnought has gone toe-to-toe with the demon Primarch Magnus the Red, and inflicted upon him a wound that, and I quote, hurt more profoundly than any mortal had hurt him before, and lived to tell the tale. Bjorn is possibly the single most accomplished Astartes in the history of the Imperium. Even before being interned into a dreadnought, Bjorn had saved his Primarch Leman Russ's life, and took part in other heroic actions during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Bjorn has quite literally guarded the gates of hell. At the closing of the 31st millennium, with Bjorn being over 1,000 years old, he led a raid to free his brothers trapped in an enemy fortress, which he was successful in, but was mortally wounded. His body was placed into stasis and interred in an utterly unique dreadnought chassis, it having been custom built for him. Though seemingly based on the Castraferrum pattern, Bjorn's greatest achievement in the 41st millennium is the Battle of the Fang, where Bjorn and a single company of Space Wolves and all the dreadnoughts of the chapter stood alone against Magnus the Red and his 1,000 sons. Under Bjorn's leadership, the Space Wolves held for 40 days and 40 nights, long enough for reinforcements to arrive and drive off the 1,000 sons. Bjorn had reaped such a toll on the Sons of Prospero that they would be forever diminished, and Magnus himself would be seriously wounded. To grossly oversimplify this ancient warrior's role in the Battle of the Fang, Bjorn is the single reason the Space Wolves still exist in the 41st millennium. A feat he would repeat during what would become to known as the Months of Shame, a near-civil war within the Imperium, following on from the First War of Armageddon against the forces of the Demon Primarch Angron. The Space Wolves and the Inquisition came to blows over what was to be done with the surviving Imperial Guard regiments. The Inquisition wished to purge them to stop the spread of Khornate corruption. The Space Wolves, understandably, objected to the slaughter of loyal warriors. Logan Grimnar, the chapter master of the Space Wolves, even killed the Grand Master of the Grey Knight's 8th Brotherhood. The Months of Shame resulted in an Inquisitorial exterminatus fleet being brought to Fenris. In desperation, the Space Wolves awoke Bjorn, who calmed the situation using his grandeur and wisdom to quell the Inquisition, and later to even cow his own chapter master when the conflict pushed the Space Wolves to the edge of destruction, marking the second time Bjorn has saved his entire chapter. Yet the years hang heavy on Bjorn. Russ's decision to leave him behind when the Primarch departed for the Eye of Terror has always haunted the old warrior. Plus, the living hell that is being interred in a dreadnought has taken its toll on Bjorn. He has longed for death more than once. He has endured and lived through more than any other Space Marine. Perhaps if Russ should ever return, he can reconcile with his old bodyguard and bring some peace to the venerable warrior. Until that day, at the dawn of each century, Bjorn is awoken and brought to the Great Hall of the Space Wolves Fortress Monastery, where warriors old and new listen to his tales. The boisterous Space Wolf sitting in reverent silence as quite possibly the greatest Space Marine to ever live tells their chapter's history.
They think I do not know what they have done to my tomb. So, to assuage their guilt, they drape my tomb with skulls and totems, trinkets. I loathe them, and I need to kill. By Rus, I need to share my pain. Did you know how angry that made me? That you never said why? I think you knew. You knew I would hate this. You knew every moment would be torture for me. And that, above all, makes me believe you kept the truth from me for a reason. This anger, this betrayal, it keeps me alive. I loved you as none of your sons loved you. You knew this. You knew I would hate you. You, who left me to this fate. I would have pierced the veils of reality with you, marched with you to destiny, stood beside you against the enemy you knew was waiting. And I know what you were doing. You birthed this hate in me, as potent as the love I still cannot shake. For hate is the most powerful drive in the universe. And you needed to give me such power that the wolves would never be without a defender.
Bjorn isn't the only famous Space Wolf Dreadnought, and the Blood Angels aren't the only chapter with crazed Berserker Dreadnoughts. The not-so-subtly named Murderfang is a Dreadnought of the Space Wolves, whose occupant has been lost to the curse of the Wolfen, a curse in which a Space Wolf transforms into a gigantic werewolf-like creature. We don't quite know where or when Murderfang appeared. It would seem even the original name of the hero entombed in the now monstrous machine has been lost. All we know of Murderfang is he is kept in the depths of the Space Wolf Fortress Monastery, sealed in a prison of ice. During the direst circumstances, he is unleashed to sate his bloodlust on the foes of mankind. When the battle ends, the Space Wolves re-encase the machine beast in ice using their Hellfrost guns. Bray'arth Ashmantle is the current incumbent of the Iron Dragon. As we covered earlier, this dreadnought was crafted by the Primarch of the Salamanders, Vulcan. It is the rumoured prototype that later became the basis of the Ironclad pattern, powered by ancient and powerful thermic generation technologies. The Iron Drake is truly a mechanical marvel. The tech priests of the 41st millennium are left baffled by its strange artifice. Yet time and the endless horrors this dreadnought has seen have taken their toll. The machine spirits contained within the dreadnought brood with unquiet violence, making it so only the strongest-willed, violent, and truest devotees of the Promethean Creed can hope to pilot this venerable machine. This has led to the Salamanders leaving the dreadnought locked away in reliquary vaults of Prometheus, the moon of their homeworld Nocturne. Yet, in times of great peril to the chapter, they will inter such a warrior. Just how many have been lost to the raging machine spirits of the Iron Dragon is and will forever be unknown. The current occupant is Sokhar Bray'arth, who was interred in 755 M41 after being wounded during the infamous purging of Imgal. The moons of Imgal were home to a unique gene sealer biomorph, and was some of the earliest tyrannies encountered by the Imperium of Man. After tracing the source of these strange Xenos to the moons of Imgal, the Salamanders were sent in to drown the infested tunnels in fire. In life, Bray'arth had earned a reputation for being a merciless and unforgiving warrior, a far cry from the depictions of the Salamanders we're used to. Bray'arth rose to the rank of captain by sheer martial prowess alone and served for centuries, during which he clashed with commanders and over the years gained a reputation for being quick to anger and insubordination. In truth, Bray'arth was alone amongst his brothers, and after serving for 500 years, it seemed he had lost their trust. His deeds were mighty, but a shadow followed him. His assaults were bloodthirsty and often led to unnecessary casualties. So when he entered Imgal, he was eager to prove himself to his brothers. It was during the hellish tunnel fighting that Bray'arth would find he and his company pinned by Genestealers, trapped and being cut down. The Salamanders had few options, yet Bray'arth stepped forward, hefting his mighty Thunderhammer. He stood alone against the tide of chittering Xenos beasts. Fighting solo, he held a rear guard for his entire company, slaying scores of Genestealers. Suffering terrible injuries, Bray'arth fought on. Bray'arth's sacrifice saved his company, and when his mortally wounded body was recovered, the decision to inter him in the Iron Drake was made. For 5 decades, Bray'arth slumbered, his mind and the tumultuous machine spirits of the Iron Dragon mixing. Many likely feared he would be claimed by the Dreadnought, as so many stalwart heroes had in the past. Yet it was not so, and what was awoken was a true force of Promethean destruction, earning the name Ashmantle for when he alone followed the retreating forces of the Black Legion into a series of tunnels. The Dreadnought was thought lost, until 9 days later, he smashed his way out of the tunnels, every inch of his tremendous bulk covered in ash. Bray'arth's last known action was during the calamitous Badab War, the largest Space Marine on Space Marine conflict since the Horus Heresy. When the traitorous chapter master of the Astral Claws, Luft Huron, refused to heed the orders of the Inquisition and the High Lords of Terror, he rallied other chapters to his cause, calling upon old oaths of allegiance. The Salamanders were one of many chapters called upon to put down this insurrection, but all they could muster was an understrength force of the Second Company. With a desperate need for destructive power, Bray'arth was awoken and proved his prowess time and time again in the conflict. There is, though, perhaps one Dreadnought we'd be remiss in leaving out. Having become rather infamous in the community in recent years, Rylanor of the Emperor's Children, the Ancient of Rites. Before being interred in a Contemptor Dreadnought, Rylanor was the Master of Rites for the Emperor's Children Legion. This meant he oversaw the rituals and traditions of the Legion, along with the training and ascension of new recruits. Struck down in a conflict with the Eldar, Rylanor was interred in a Contemptor Dreadnought. Even as a Contemptor, Rylanor continued to look after the traditions of the Legion, and was frankly very kind and caring to his brothers, providing sage advice and counsel whenever asked. Rylanor was truly everything you would or could want from a loyalist Dreadnought. His most famous deed, though, is the destruction of the demon Primarch Fulgrim, his former Primarch, his former father. Lying in the ruins of Istvan, Rylanor, through sheer will, created a psychic beacon to lure his former lord to the world. Betrayed by his Thousand Sons escort, Rylanor managed to cast Fulgrim back into the warp, damaging the most important thing to the demon Primarch, his pride, as seen in The Ancient Awaits.
Is this it? You sought to draw me and to kill me?
Rylanor triggered his assault cannon, but fast as Quicksilver, Fulgrim caught it and crushed it before it could fire.
No, I don't think so,
said the Primarch, effortlessly ripping the arm from the Dreadnought's body.
You betrayed us! Your sons! You led us here to die. There is no forgiveness for that. None! You must die by my hand. The Emperor's justice will fall upon you. Not even Fulgrim the Illuminator can escape the Life Eater.
You wish me dead? Why? Because you think I betrayed you? The Legion? Oh, Rylanor, your thoughts are so narrow. If you could only see us now, how beautiful we have become. We shine so brightly. Each of us a brilliant sun!
Fulgrim reached down, sliding his bare hand inside a rent torn in the Dreadnought's armor.
Ah, there you are, wet and wriggling. I can feel your panic. It's delicious. Delicious.
Rylanor's power fist swung around, bathed in fire. It struck Fulgrim on the shoulder, but Akhtar's psychic force was not simply confined to the Life Eater's detonation. Fulgrim laughed off the sluggish attack, and one of his lower arms drew a glittering sword of alien origin. The blade sliced in a cruelly precise arc, cutting through the fiber bundle motivators and servos. Rylanor's arm fell limp at his side. Vistario watched as the viral fire spread over the Dreadnaught's carapace, slipping inside his buckled plates of armor. Rylanor did not care whether he lived or died, only that Fulgrim went with him.
Do not do this!
Why not? I am your master. I can do whatever I like. I can crush you, or I can raise you up. Return to the Legion. Accept the gifts of the Dark Prince, and you will walk at my side, clad once again in flesh. You can be anything, old friend. I will sculpt you into something beautiful, a god to these mortals!
Never! All we have left between us is that we will die together. I am Rylanor of the Emperor's Children, Ancient of Rights, Venerable of the Palatine Host, and a proud servant of the Emperor of Mankind, beloved by all. I reject you, now and always.
I'm sorry. Did it sound like I was offering you a choice?
The Primarch wrenched his hand from Rylanor's sarcophagus, dragging a sopping mass of fluid and matter with him.
I will remake you, brother. You will be my crowning achievement.
Though his body was little more than rags of wet meat, Visario sensed Rylanor's horror at this last violation, an inescapable destiny where he would become what he hated the most.
What do we do?
The question was Mashid's, and the connection between the Thousand Suns was so strong that Athanian's perception for emotion spread to all three of them. Vistario felt Fulgrim's infinite malice, his cruel enjoyment of Rylanor's anguish, and the helplessness of the Thousand Suns. The Primarch of the Emperor's Children reveled in his overwhelming pride, a trait Magnus had more than once told Vistario had been long present before his fall. But more than anything, stronger than even Fulgrim's spite, Vistario felt Rylanor's pride and honor, the unbending core of greatness that had set him against his brothers, and had seen him descend into obsessive madness beneath the surface of a dead world. Vistario took the measure of Fulgrim, seeing nothing worthy in him. His warriors felt the moment his decision was made.
Primarch Fulgrim, Rylanor deserves better than you!
The Primarch looked up, his once bright eyes now black and filled with the darkest poison.
He deserves better than all of us.
He raised his bolter and fired a mass-reactive round into the back of Akhtar's skull. The Raptora's head exploded, and with his death, the psychic force holding back the warhead's detonation ended. Vistario saw fire, and once more, all life burned. The reason we think Rylanor's story resonates so deeply with people is that Rylanor was dutiful. There's a part in all of us that would like to have the strength and dedication of Rylanor, to believe that we would hold on alone in the darkness to the truth and traditions we hold dear. Rylanor was everything the Emperor's children were meant to be. It is said that only in death does duty end, for those destined to become dreadnoughts. It is the case that death is not the end of duty. Within their sarcophagi, the interred Marine's hatred is crystallized into endless dedication. For these once fallen angels of death, their purpose is to fight through the eons, never becoming attached, for their new comrades may be long dead the next time they wake. To be a dreadnought is to be given immense power at the cost of every bodily sense, and the chance to see the sky. Nevertheless, those of iron will never falter, never break, and never fail.
Vitals online. Synaptic cores realigning. Biogeries look good. All runes are in the green. Full Sensorum coming online now.
Cassian tried to blink as light flooded his vision, yet even his eyelids seemed numbed. The pain swiftly subsided as he adjusted to the sudden restoration of his sight, and he realized that he was in a shipboard apothecarian. 3 apothecaries whom he didn't recognize crowded him. To his surprise, there was a tech marine there. Suddenly, data feeds began scrolling down his peripheral vision. He could see power levels, reactor stability readings, Vox and Allspex data. Realization began to dawn as he tried to look down at himself, only to feel a jarring sense of dislocation.
I cannot feel my body. It is all right, brother. Your body was ravaged beyond the apothecarian's abilities to restore. We saved only those parts you would need. I would need...
Cassian knew what they were saying, but even as the conditioned part of his psyche processed the revelation, another part of his mind was screaming in panic and trying desperately to move his limbs that weren't there, flex his muscles that didn't exist, and feel skin that he no longer possessed.
You made a great sacrifice, brother,
said a familiar voice, and the others parted to reveal the 4th company captain, Adrastian, clad in his shipboard robes and smiling a tight smile.
You gave up your body of flesh in the name of victory. These fine brothers have given you another, that you might continue to fight.
I am a dreadnought.
Cassian felt a chill as the realization sank in. He was organs now, biological component parts, a brain, heart, lungs, veins, arteries, and vulnerable innards, bound within an amniotic weave and entombed within the armored sarcophagus of a Redemptor. Part of him felt pride, and a thankfulness that he was not dead. The other part tried to vocalize its claustrophobic horror, but with an effort, he strangled that voice into silence.
You are a dreadnought.
How? My men... were we victorious?
Thanks in no small part to the heroic sacrifices made by yourself and brother Librarian Castraferrum. As I understand it, when you slew the enemy leader, it caused no small degree of havoc amongst the Death Guard. Many of their high-ranking lieutenants must already have been dead. Their command structure was in tatters. In the confusion, Chaplain Demetrius was able not only to pull the strike force back within the safety of the walls, but to lead a swift offensive that drove the foe from your vicinity and allowed for recovery of both your and Castraferrum's bodies.
Cassian took a moment to process this, feeling his senses gradually sinking with those of this unfamiliar metal body. He realized that he could look through multiple optic actuators at once. As he did so, he noticed that his new body was, for the moment, limbless and suspended in an intricate web of wires and armatures.
Captain, I wish to serve penance.
Penance?
I lost over half the warriors under my charge. I let Castraferrum die, and was very nearly slain myself. I cost the lives of every Cadian on Calidus, and barely succeeded in extracting any of my strike force at all. I failed in my duty, and deserve penance.
Before Adrastian could reply, the doors to the Apothecarian whispered open, and a towering figure ducked through. Cassian's heart thumped faster as he recognized the magnificent figure of the Primarch Rebute Gilliman here in person. Around Cassian, the other Ultramarines dropped to one knee. He felt his shame and frustration grow as he instinctively tried and failed to do the same.
Brother Cassian.
My lord, I am not worthy to be in your presence.
You are not just worthy, my son. You are a hero. I will hear no more talk of failure.
Cassian was lost for words.
You were thrown wildly off course by catastrophic warp storms, having already completed the mission that I sent you to accomplish. You not only held your force together through that dire experience, but you then successfully identified a means by which you could get word to us of your plight. You engaged a force of heretic Astartes several times the size of yours, whose plan would, I suspect, have caused devastation and misery across multiple systems. I am reliably informed that you showed nothing short of an absolute dedication to the completion of your mission, shrugged off a crushing defeat in alien interference, and even gave your own life to ensure the downfall of the foe. To me, Brother Cassian, those are not actions of a failure, but of a hero.
Cassian's mind reeled, and fierce pride burned within him as he felt the sincerity of his Primarch's words.
Thank you, my lord.
You will be properly honored for your valor. Commensurate accolades will be graven upon your sarcophagus by the artificers before we next go into battle.
Cassian tried to nod and realized he couldn't.
Thank you, my lord.
Thank me by learning to wield that mighty new body of yours in battle, Cassian. We are only 3 days out from the Tarkoria front. Do you think you will be battle-ready in that time?
Give me my limbs, my weapons, and I will train every moment until we make planetfall, my lord.
Good. Are you ready to keep fighting, Dreadnought Brother Cassian?
I am, my lord. The crusade must continue.